Here in North America, the hot hatch segment has typically been dominated by Volkswagen and Subaru. VW was technically the first to introduce a vehicle back in the late 70s, with Subaru really upping the horsepower war to over 300 in the early 2000 eras. Now, of course, with any kings of this segment, they're kind of comfortably sitting at the top of their perch, which left an opportunity for other manufacturers to come in and try to kick the king off of their throne, which is where Honda and Hyundai have come in. Honda actually introduced the hottest Civic here in North America 2 years ago, the Civic Type R. It instantly became the best handling front-wheel drive car that you could buy in 2017. But of course, with any benchmark, another manufacturer wants to come in to try to steal that manufacturer's thunder, and this is the 2019 Hyundai Veloster N, the hottest version of the Veloster, designed by Albert Biermann, the guy who used to run the BMW M division. So the big question I want answered, for around the $30,000 to $40,000 mark, which one of these two hot hatches deserves your money? That's what we're here to find out. At their cores, these two are economy cars. Now, because they are the highest performing versions of their economy car routes, I want to talk about what's going on underneath the hood first. Now, the first thing I want to start with is the Type R. This hood is nice and light because it's made of aluminum, and what you're looking at underneath the hood is Honda's patented 2-liter K-Series motor. It's a 2-liter turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder with about 23 pounds of boost, and this thing makes 306 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. This unique state of tune is unique to the Type R in general, although they offer a variation of this engine in the RDX and the Accord. It all goes out through the front wheels only through a limited slip differential, with a 6-speed manual being your only transmission option. Now, this vehicle weighs a tick under 3,100 pounds, and fuel economy is not bad. It's rated at 22 in the city, 28 on the highway. Please be sure to put premium gas in it. Now, in contrast, the Veloster also has a 2-liter turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder. It makes a little bit less power than the Type R, about 275 horsepower, because my tester has the optional $2,000 performance package, and torque is rated at 260 foot-pounds of torque. Now, this thing also weighs right around 3,100 pounds with power only going to the front wheels. That performance package that my tester has also adds a limited slip differential, with a 6-speed manual being the only transmission option. And then, not surprisingly, fuel economy is also the same, rated at 22 in the city, 28 on the highway. Please be sure to put premium gas in this car as well. Now, unlike the Type R's hood, this hood is not made of aluminum, and it is significantly heavier, which probably is one of the reasons why this thing weighs almost the same as the Type R, despite it being considerably smaller. Now, exterior design is also an important aspect. Now, let's first talk about the Veloster N. This is part of the second-generation Veloster that Hyundai introduced just last year, and I actually think it's a really attractive-looking car. The N gets its own unique, specific styling cues. Of course, you have the Cascade waterfall-style grille with this black accents. You have these red trim that's on the lower fascia with a much more aggressive-looking front end. You have LED headlights, which are standard with LED daytime running lights. They are only an LED low beam. The high beam is incandescent, the turn signal is incandescent, and you don't actually have any fog lights, but you do have some functional air inlets, which make this thing look definitely much more aggressive versus the standard Veloster or the Veloster R spec. Remember, Hyundai offers this thing with 2 different turbocharged engines, just like the Civic. Now, in contrast, the Civic has a design that really stands out versus the Hyundais. Some of you are either going to love or hate the design of the Civic. It still gets a lot of stares wherever you take this thing. It kind of just screams pocket rocket, racer. It's a little bit of a high schooler car. I actually think it looks good, but again, it's going to come down to your personal taste. Honda hasn't made any changes to the Type R in 2019 in terms of the design. You still have full LED headlights, which are standard, with LED turn signals, LED low and high beams, and LED fog lights. So I love the fact that Honda still gives fog lights. There are a couple of vents in here that are functional. This kind of creates an air curtain over the wheels to help cool the brakes. These are fake. The carbon fiber that you see, which is kind of just all over the car, is fake carbon fiber, but it is tasteful, especially in this Aegean blue color. The one thing I am noticing, the Civic has a functional hood scoop here that helps to cool the engine, but overall it definitely has a much bigger appearance to it because this vehicle is significantly wider and significantly larger versus the Hyundai. But let me talk about the dimensions of the cars for just a second. The Civic, as I said, is a full four-door vehicle. This car has a 106.3 inch wheelbase, and at 178 inches long, it's about 11 inches longer than the Hyundai, which you're gonna notice immediately in the fact that this thing has much more interior space. The wheels are also larger. These are 20-inch wheels that come standard on the Type R. They're riding on 245 with tires. Surprisingly, the wheels look a little small because of the offset. It just doesn't come out far enough because of these wider fenders. This Civic in general is about 2.5 inches wider than the Hyundai, and it's about 1.5 inches taller as well. The one thing you're gonna notice, the brakes, Honda put some serious brakes on the Type R. These are 4-piston Brembo calipers with 13.8-inch slotted rotors. So again, massive brakes that really improve the stopping power of the Civic. You're gonna have a 4-wheel independent suspension, more carbon fiber trim on the lower side sills, no sunroof. Honda does not offer a sunroof on the Type R. And then of course the wing back here is basically a table. You may as well just start putting your food on here because it is one of the most largest wings you can find in the segment. Honda actually puts like 3 wings here. There's a little spoiler here, a wing there, and then some little vortex generators here at the top of the roof. And overall, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be a little bit too much. But again, if this is your cup of tea, you're gonna like the styling of the Civic. The taillights are kind of a combination of an LED incandescent. I really dislike the fake vents over here. And then you have more carbon fiber trim. The triple exhaust, I'll let you guys hear what that sounds like real quick. And as you heard, for how aggressive this car looks, the sound is a little bit weak. So that's something that I complained about previously and something that I'm still going to complain about. Now, in terms of the cargo capacity, the Type R's is of course going to win because this is a bigger vehicle in general. You're looking at around 25.7 cubic feet of space. There's this cool little cargo cover that you can basically move from side to side. And if you fold down the rear seat, you're gonna get around 46 cubic feet of space. Now, in relation, let's go over to the Hyundai and talk about the actual size. The Veloster in general is a funky looking vehicle because on this side, the passenger side, it has 4 doors. But if you look on the driver's side, it has 2 doors. So it has that funky 3-door design, which again was a controversial element of the Veloster, but I'm glad that Hyundai decided to keep it. At a wheelbase of around 104.3 inches, it's 2 inches shorter in the wheelbase than the Type R, but at only 169 inches long, it's 11 inches shorter, as I mentioned, giving this thing a much smaller footprint. Now the wheels, these wheels are optional. They're part of the performance package that my tester has. They're a 19-inch wheel on 235 series tires. They're on Pirelli P0 Summers where the Civic has Continentals. The brakes also are not anything special. They're not Brembo brakes, but they are enlarged for the performance model. These are 13.6-inch rotors at the front, not that much smaller than the Type R's with a red painted caliper, but they're just kind of a single piston floating caliper. These brakes actually came off of a Kia Optima. That's what Hyundai said when they were designing the brakes. The suspension is fully independent, just like the Veloster R-Spec. And as you can see, there's another red trim here with these lower side sill extensions. The rear brakes are a little bit larger than the Type R's. These are 12.4-inch rotors that are ventilated versus the solid disc on the Honda, which again adds to the stopping power, although the Civic from numbers has a little bit better stopping power versus the Hyundai. Now, the rear design of the Veloster, I think, is the more attractive option versus the Civic. Instead of a big giant wing, Hyundai puts this very tasteful wing with some faux carbon fiber on the side here, where it kind of gives you a double wing accent because the actual trunk lid area over here already has a wing that's kind of built in. This is unique to the N model. You have combination LED taillights here at the back with an incandescent turn signal and brake lights. And then down here, there are some more fake vents, but they're not quite as garish looking as the Civics. And then you have the same red trim and this rear underbody spoiler. Now the exhaust, as you can see, instead of that triple exhaust, Hyundai went with a much more traditional look with these fat tips. I'll let you guys hear what that sounds like real quick. And the biggest surprise about the Veloster N is the way it sounds. It has those crackles, those pops. It sounds like the Civic Type R. It sounds like it should have No, it sounds like what this Type R should have sounded like, but instead Hyundai had the balls to give this thing a really mean and aggressive sound. Now, the cargo capacity, as you can see, is going to be smaller than the Civics because this is a smaller vehicle. With the seats up, Hyundai says the space is around 19.9 cubic feet. If you fold down those rear seats, you're going to get around 44 cubic feet of space. So not considerably smaller, but just know that the Civic is going to give you a little bit more space. Moving to the inside of these hot hatches, I'm going to first start with the Civic, because the Civic's interior will pretty much attract your attention to the way the exterior does. The seats are definitely the most appealing part of this car. These are the standard seats. They're kind of a mixture of a suede Alcantara with some netting material. I love the red. I love the fact that they already have the holes right here where you could put like a racing harness in them. And the seats also hold you in place nicely. They're very comfortable. They're very supportive. Even people of a wider stature can mostly fit into these seats. These are one of the best sports seats in the segment. Now, the key fob, here's the current Honda key fob. Their intelligent access key comes standard. You'll know it's a Type R because it has a red Honda badge. All you have to do is put the clutch in, keep this key fob in here, and the vehicle will start right up for you. As you heard, the noise is pretty weak. It just sounds like a lot of other four-cylinder turbos with a little bit of a deeper exhaust noise, but it just doesn't match the character of this car. Now, I've shown you guys the interior of this Type R before. Honda didn't really make any changes. This one that I'm sitting in is a 2018 model, so it doesn't have the new volume knob that Honda added where they slightly updated the center stack. This is the standard Honda Link infotainment system. It's an 8-inch touchscreen display. It does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It also has a built-in GPS function, which is kind of like a Garmin TomTom based navigation style. It looks fairly nice. It works fairly well. Would love to show you guys the 19 model, which I'll have at a later time to show you the updated system. The materials, as you can see, are soft touch grading material with some faux stitching, some fake carbon fiber, some more red accents. Some parts of the dash feel a little bit more hollow than other parts. There's some cheaper plastic over here, but the door panels are also soft touch. The steering wheel is nice and fat. It has tilt telescoping adjustability with a pretty good amount of range. You have a really nice looking infotainment system with an instrument panel over here. The steering wheel itself feels nice and heavy. Your drive mode selector is going to be down here where you can go between R+, Sport, which is what the car defaults to, and then a comfort setting. The one thing about this car that I wish Honda would add was a button where I could turn on and off the rev matching. To do that now, you have to go into the infotainment system here, and you have to go to the vehicle settings, and the parking brake has to be on. So Hyundai actually gives you a dedicated button. I think Honda needs to also follow that same suite. If you guys are looking for any driver assistance tech, it's not available on the Type R. Neither is a sunroof, so don't expect to find any blind spot, no adaptive cruise control, no automatic braking, no lane keep. Honda sensing is unavailable on the Type R. And I think that's okay. It's going to be fine with most people. Now, down here in the center console, it's a nice padded area with a sliding armrest. You have basically 3 cup holders in here with a pretty deep amount of storage, in addition to most storage over here. The transmission, 6-speed manual, where it's also that metal ball. It's one of the best manuals in the business. If you guys really like the manual from the S2000, this will remind you of it completely. The clutch also is nice and springy. It's pretty short travel. When you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there is a backup camera. Although the display is a little bit grainy, Honda has a much newer display in some of their newer infotainment systems. So again, they don't really give the Type R all the best tech, which is what I expected. The glove compartment, as you can see, is not damped. It kind of just falls down, but it does offer a good amount of space in there to store your things. Let's hop into the backseat really quick and see how it compares to the Veloster. Hopping into the back seat of the Type R, because this vehicle is considerably larger, obviously you're going to have more interior space. Honda says the legroom is around 36 inches of space. This is the same as the regular Civic hatch. You can see the floor here isn't completely flat, but at 5'7", I have a pretty good amount of space. In terms of features, it is pretty much lacking back here. Because of the seats, there's no seat back pockets, no rear seat air vents. The materials are hard touch plastic, so they kind of downgraded you there. There isn't even an armrest here, and this car is only technically a 4-seater because they removed the center seat here with the actual seat belt. You know, that's kind of a Type R thing, but I just think that Honda should have just kept the fact that this is a 5-seater. That little extra seat could have been used in a pinch for a lot of owners. But overall, the backseat of the Type R is still the more usable option because it has 4 full-size doors and you have more space versus the Hyundai. So after just coming out of the Type R's interior and into the Hyundai's, I have to say this interior definitely feels and looks cheap compared to the Hondas. And honestly, the Honda's interior isn't all that nice, but Hyundai decided to go with very cheap hard plastics everywhere, whereas the Civic gave you a soft touch grading material. Don't love the scratchy feel of the plastics here, and the hard touch plastic is carried onto the door panels. So I was pretty disappointed to see that Hyundai decided to go with a very cheap interior. But remember, this car is significantly less expensive at the base end, almost $10,000 less expensive. Now the seats also are manual adjustable. You have a tilt telescoping steering wheel, which is nice, and then the key fob. This is the standard Hyundai key fob with their intelligent access. It is included on the end, and it'll remind you have an N because of an N badge on the key fob. But just like the Civic, to start up, put the clutch in. But the moment you start up the Veloster N, it kind of tells you that this is a special car because of that exhaust noise. I mean, this is what a hot hatch is supposed to sound like. So shame on you, Honda, for making the Type R sound incredibly weak. But bravo for Hyundai. But the rest of the interior, you can see the 7-inch infotainment system here is standard. You do have Apple CarPlay and you have Android Auto, which is nice. The screen itself is the typical Hyundai. It's got a good layout. It is a little easier to use versus the Civic because it's got an actual volume knob and a tuning knob, but the 2019 Civic has a volume knob but no tuning knob. The screen itself has that tablet style look. I don't love the black bezel that's very large here. I think that Hyundai should have went with a cleaner, like frameless look as opposed to this giant bezel. But overall, it definitely looks good. There is no embedded navigation like you get in the Civic. Remember, the Civic Type R is kind of billed as like a touring version, where this Hyundai decided to go with an interior that's more minimalistic. The N characteristics in here, the seats, as you can see, have like a blue stitching on them. There's an N badge, but honestly, the seats in the Veloster R-Spec look more interesting, and you can also get the Veloster Turbo Ultimate that has like a leather seat. Leather is unavailable on this car. The bolsters are nice, but I just wish that Hyundai went with a more interesting seat. There are these blue seat belts here, which are an N characteristic again. The Type R had red seat belts, which again look a little bit cooler than the blue. There's some more blue accents here. The steering wheel also tilts and telescopes, which is good. Good amount of adjustability, and then it's also nice blue stitching. It's leather wrapped. Which also makes this car feel a little bit more sporty. Now, the drive modes, unlike the Hondas, which puts them down here, Hyundai puts them right on the steering wheel, which I think is actually the better location, because the Honda, I have to look down versus here I just have them here. You can cycle between either normal, sport, or eco, or push this little checkered flag. There's a custom mode where you can go into the full N mode, or you can adjust everything to your liking when you go here into the screen. You can see Hyundai lets you choose the responsiveness of the engine, the rev matching, the limited slip diff, and the exhaust sound. So that's something that Honda doesn't offer. I imagine they may consider doing that at a later date, but just know that Hyundai was a little bit more clever. They thought a little bit more about that in the actual interior with the customization. Now the manual transmission, you can see the shifter itself is positioned a little bit lower. It has really nice throws. They are a little bit longer versus the Civics. Reverse also, instead Hyundai puts it over here where you have to pull the ring, and then they put it next to first gear. When you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there's the backup camera. It has trajectory just like the Civic. It's a little bit better resolution to me. It just looks like it shows you a little more information. The clutch also, it feels like it's a little bit longer travel, but it's a little bit less springy. It's a little bit lighter versus what you get in the Honda. So again, we'll go into the test drive later on. Unlike the Civic, you have a traditional handbrake here, which a lot of you enthusiasts or purists are going to prefer because you can do some J turns, or you can basically pull the e-brake and do some J U-turns or whatever you'd like to do with your hot hatch. The cup holders are down here, more storage, and then the center console here is a little bit on the smaller side, not quite as big as what you get in the Civic, and then the lid itself isn't covered in any fancy materials. It doesn't adjust. Now the glove compartment also, it's a little bit larger, but it is damped, not lined with felt. But overall, the interior, I think Hyundai should consider offering an ultimate version of the N where they give you some more features like a sunroof, better looking seats, better interior materials. But again, this is all to a price point, but let's hop into that back seat and see how it compares. Now getting into the back seat of the Veloster, you're gonna wanna do it from the passenger side, which is why my camera guy's over there filming through the driver's side door. But getting back here, this low roof requires me to literally kink my head over so I don't bang it along the roof. But once you get back here, it's definitely less space than the Civic. Hyundai says you're going to get around 33 inches of legroom, which is about 2 or 3 less than what you get in the Honda. The materials are pretty much hard touch plastic. It's very dark in here. there's too much black, there's no sunroof available, smaller windows. I mean, there's a nice full-size window here, but over here you have like a coupe window, which is very strange. It just confuses me. If you guys are OCD about things being proportional, this is not the car for you. Now, just like the Civic, it's also a two-seater back here, but there is a floor that's almost completely flat, so that's a little bit better. But it doesn't really matter because there's no actual seat belt here. No rear seat vents, no features like no heated rear seats, no armrests. But overall, if you're planning to actually put people in the back seats, you're gonna wanna pick the Civic Type R. So to get the driving scene started, let me first begin in the Civic Type R. It's been a while since I've actually driven one of these. I proclaimed it to be basically the best front-wheel drive car I've ever driven when I drove this thing almost 2 years ago. It's hard to imagine the Type R has been around for 2 years, but the one thing about this car that will always surprise me or anyone else who's never driven it is for how outlandish and garish this car looks on the outside. It actually drives quite nicely. It's a very refined driving car that kind of reminds you that Honda is very conservative in the way they build and the way they tune things. They just want this car to be easy to daily drive, and it definitely is. If you plan to actually use this car as your only car to drive on the highway every day, I mean, I have the car in R+ right now, its harshest setting, and it's still reasonably comfortable. The ride quality, while it is firm, you know, it reminds you that this is no ordinary Civic. You could daily drive this, it's livable, it's not gonna break your back. If I want, I can go to sport mode here, or I can go to comfort. In comfort mode, the steering lights up, the suspension, the adaptive dampers get a lot softer. The responsiveness of the engine definitely is tailored back a little bit. I praise Honda for not doing an eco mode in this thing. It's a frickin' Type R. And the road noise is agreeable. I mean, the 20-inch wheels, you do hear some road noise on pavement like this, but it's not totally like unbearable. It's perfectly fine, and the seats also super comfortable. One of the best sport seats in the business, really, and they kind of just add to the special feeling of the Type R. Now, the main problem with this car is the engine. It is too quiet. That triple exhaust in the back just doesn't make any noise. You know, you want something like this to make some kind of crackle, some kind of pop, and it doesn't really do that. Now, the handling of the Type R, it's still splendid. It still has really amazing communicative steering. It still has a suspension that stays incredibly flat, incredibly neutral. This is a car that is easily trackable. I mean, you can take this thing to the track, you can take it to, you can daily drive it, you can go on your favorite back road. The steering is so sharp, the suspension is well tuned for a good ride quality balance, for everything, basically. So it kind of reminds you that Honda has a lot of experience in this segment, or in tuning and chassis tuning, and the Type R, you know, as their halo vehicle, it delivers on that promise. Now, in other typical Honda fashion, the engine has so much low-end torque. And I'm sorry, it's not really in typical Honda fashion. It is new Honda fashion with the 2-liter turbo with 306 ponies. I mean, I can be in third or fifth gear here and pull, and this thing will pull to triple-digit speeds so quickly. It's incredible, really, how fast this car is. Honda says 0 to 60 times are around the mid 5-second range. I've seen it as quick as 5 seconds for this thing. And it definitely feels like it. The engine feels underrated the way it is. It's a honey of an engine that'll pull all the way to its 7,000 RPM Redline with no problem. But it's such an unremarkable noise. Like right now I'm in fifth gear, it's at almost 4,000 RPM. Put my foot down here and it's like, okay, I hear a little bit of a 4-cylinder wail, like a vacuum noise, but no crackles from the exhaust, nothing really. But the overall experience is generally pleasant. It just doesn't match the character, the looks of this car on the outside. I wish that Honda did a better job with making this thing actually feel like the ricer that it actually looks like on the outside. Third gear pull. Oh yeah, that's where that extra 30 horses comes into play, right there. A third gear pull and that little Veloster end can keep up until about past 60, at 60 miles an hour, the Type R just kind of takes off. So that extra 30 horses makes a difference. I applaud Hyundai for what they did, but if they want to compete with the Type R, they're gonna need to put more power in that thing. The rev match function in this car also works well. It just doesn't make much of a noise I'll go to second there. Makes you basically a pro when you're driving stick. Love the rev match function. I wish that Honda allowed you to turn it on and off without having to have the parking brake on. But with a front wheel drive car, I want to test out the torque steer in the Type R, and then we'll compare it to the Veloster N. So I'm going to put it in first gear, and I'm basically going to floor it, and we're going to feel how much tugging this thing has at the wheel. Wheel hopping? Oh, Jesus. Okay. Typical front wheel drive characteristics, so I can't really blame the Type R for that.
I stalled.
That's what took you so long, Rob. Come on. And with the traction control off, this thing really likes to wheel hop a lot. So again, 306 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque going to the front wheels. Not the best for traction. So Type R could use all-wheel drive for sure. Honda's a little trickery with their, dual axis suspension. It works wonders in reducing the torque steer, but remember, this car still is front-wheel drive. It has that limited slip diff, but the bouncing, the hopping can be disconcerting if you guys aren't used to a powerful front-wheel drive car. But the Type R, it's one of the most powerful front-wheel drive cars. It still has the wheel hop, slight torque steer. But enough about this car. Let's hop into the newcomer, the Veloster N, and see how it compares to the benchmark in the front drive hot hatch segment. So having just hopped out of the Type R and into the Veloster, the one thing you're immediately going to notice, or at least what I noticed, is the clutch engagement point is slightly different in this car. It's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit longer travel, but it engages kind of right at the end, which makes it a little bit easier to stall this car versus the Civic. And I have it in its full-on N mode right now, and you definitely notice the ride quality is firmer, noticeably firmer than the Civics. Hyundai also does with adaptive dampers. They also have a limited slip diff. They also have fully independent suspension. Now, the Hyundai's engine doesn't enjoy being revved out to the 7,000 RPM that the Civic will do all day long. But I love the exhaust, the pops, the crackles. Like, that is probably the best part of the Veloster in general. You want to short shift this thing at around 6,400, because if you keep going to almost 68, you'll bounce off the rev limiter. And Hyundai gives you these series of lights to let you know when to shift, which the Civic kind of gives you a little bit of a light as well, but it's not quite as elaborate as the Hyundai's for sure. But God, the two cars have really incredible steering. Hyundai used to be so behind in terms of steering feel, and that's just simply not the case anymore. But definitely the Hyundai feels noticeably slower than the Civic. 0 to 60 time, the quickest time I've seen is just under 6 seconds, 5.9 seconds. It feels like it's between a half second to a full second slower than the Type R, which is fine because this car is, remember, less expensive and it's down about 30 horsepower. But you don't really lose any of the drama, the joy. This is still an incredibly fun car to drive. That makes all the right noises, but God, that ride quality, ooh, it's so bouncy when you just hit smooth pavement like what I'm on right now. Let me go over to normal. You can hear in normal, the exhaust gets a little quieter. The rev match automatically turns off, but Hyundai allows you to turn it on and off there. And this kind of sounds like the Type R in this regard, like in this normal form. It's a little too quiet for my taste, but the ride gets noticeably softer. But why would you do that when you can go into N mode? It's just much more pleasant. Now I'm going to turn off the stability control here. Or we'll just leave it in its sport setting. To a little clutch dump here. Cutting power. Yeah, I mean, this thing is plenty fast. I mean, sure, is the Type R going to beat you in a drag race? Yes. The Hyundai, however, is not far behind. It sounds great. The transmission feels good. The chassis feels good. The steering is good. It's just harsher in terms of the ride quality. Now, visibility is also not as good as the Civics, although this car is smaller, so the front visibility is good. The back visibility, however, is not. And just like the Honda, there's no driver assistance in this car whatsoever. Oh, turn off the traction control. This thing will spin out its tires. So don't turn off the traction control, otherwise you just look like an asshole every time you really go through the gears. But God, this thing is fun. That noise is the best part about the Veloster. And gosh, why, Honda? Why didn't you make this your Type R sound like this? This sounds like the Type R should sound. Like, or it sounds the way the Type R should sound because of the way it looks. Slight understeer there, but man, this thing really puts the power down well. So if you guys are actually looking to purchase a hot hatch, now may be the very best time to do so, because we've got two of the best hot hatches that money can buy right now. And the best thing about them, neither of them are a Volkswagen or a Subaru. They both come from kind of newcomers in the segment, the Civic Type R, and then the newest newcomer, the Hyundai Veloster N. But let me first talk about my points with the Veloster N. This is a car that starts at $26,000. That's a full $9,000 less expensive than the Civic. Now, of course, with less money, you're going to be making a few compromises. The car does not ride quite as well. It's still got a very harsh ride that's a little too firm if you guys are going to daily drive this in the N mode. The interior is cheap, but again, everything's to a price point. It is missing a couple of features that you can get on the Civic, and the fact that it is a smaller vehicle with that funky three-door design. This is a car that definitely will stand out, but not stand out in such a garish way that the Civic tends to stand out with all of its body lines. Now, my tester, of course, with the premium or with the performance package, stickers for just under $30,000 at $29,900, which makes it one hell of a deal. And even though it's not quite as fast as the Civic, you're not giving up any of the fun factor. This has a really great engine. It's got a really hilarious exhaust note. It's got a slick shifting manual. It can put the power down well because it's got a suspension that was tuned by somebody that actually knows what they're doing. Now, in relation to the Hyundai, the Civic, of course, is the king of the segment. It's still the best handling front-wheel drive car. It will smoke the Hyundai in most of the acceleration tests and in the handling test. And even though this is a bigger vehicle, you don't necessarily feel it out on the road unless you're trying to park the thing, but you do get something that's a little bit more spacious. It's a little bit easier to live with on a daily basis. And as long as you can get past the styling, this is the car that's going to be a little bit easier to live with. Now, of course, all of this is going to come at a price. This car starts at $35,700 plus destination. There are no options for the Civic Type R, except for the fact that there are still dealer markups on this thing. So I've seen dealers in my area charging between $5,000 to $10,000 over sticker. Now, that makes the comparison, or at least the conclusion of this test, a little bit skewed for me, because I would easily pay the extra $5,000 or $6,000 for the Honda. I think it's worth that much money over the $30,000 that Hyundai is asking for the Veloster. But if you're going to be spending $40,000 to $45,000 on the Civic, my opinion might change. I might just say go for the Veloster N, because it's also equally special feeling. It's equally new. It doesn't give up anything in terms of the fun factor. You're just giving up a little bit in terms of comfort and refinement. But if you can find a Type R at sticker, I'd say pick the Honda. If you can't, I'd say just go for the Hyundai, because I think it's the better value. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my comparison test between the two hottest hatches for 2019, the Civic Type R and the Veloster N. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook. And as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.